So imagine you're standing on a street anywhere in America, and a Japanese man comes up to you and says, excuse me, what is the name of this block? And you say, I'm sorry, well, this is Oak Street, that's Elm Street, this is 26th, that's 27th. He says, okay, but what is the name of that block? You say, well, blocks don't have names. Streets have names. Blocks are just the unnamed spaces in between streets. He leaves a little confused and disappointed.
So imagine you're walking down a street in America, and a Japanese man approaches you and asks you, excuse me, sir, but what's the name of this block? You look at him a little puzzled and say, well, this is such and such street. He says, okay, I get that, but what is the name of the block? And you look at him again kind of puzzled and say, well, streets have names, but blocks don't. Blocks are just the unnamed space in between the streets. The Japanese man leaves a little confused and disappointed.
So now imagine you're standing on a street anywhere in Japan. You turn to a person next to you and say, excuse me, what is the name of this street? And they say, oh, well, that's block 17 and this is block 16. And you say, okay, but what is the name of this street? And they say, well, streets don't have names. Blocks have names. Just look at Google Maps here. There's block 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. All of these blocks have names, and the streets are just the unnamed spaces in between the blocks.
So now imagine that you're in Japan, and you approach a person and says, excuse me, but what's the name of the street? They look at you kind of weird and say, well, this is block 17. And you look back at them and say, okay, but what is the name of the street? And they tell you, well, streets don't have names. I mean, look at Google Maps. This is block 17, 18, 19, 20. Streets are just the unnamed space in between the blocks.
And he'd say, okay, then how do you know your home address? He said, well, easy. This is District 8. There's block 17. House number 1. You say, okay, but walking around the neighborhood, I noticed that the house numbers don't go in order. He said, of course they do. They go in the order in which they were built. The first house ever built on a block is house number 1. The second house ever built is house number 2. Third is house number 3. It's easy. It's obvious.
So then you say, okay, but how do you know your home address? And the Japanese person might say, oh, well, that's easy. This is block 17. That's house, or excuse me, this is District 8, block 17, and that's house number 1. And you kind of think, okay, but while I was walking around the neighborhood, I noticed that the houses aren't in order. And the person might say, well, of course they are. The houses are, in order of which ones were built first. So this is that house, then that house was built first. This is house number 2 because it was built second, and so forth. It's easy. It's obvious.
So, I love that sometimes we need to go to the opposite side of the world to realize assumptions we didn't even know we had, and realize that the opposite of them may also be true. So, for example, there are doctors in China who believe that it's their job to keep you healthy. So any month you are healthy, you pay them. And when you're sick, you don't have to pay them because they failed at their job. They get rich when you're healthy, not sick.
I just love how we have to sometimes go to the opposite side of the world to realize that some of our assumptions that we have aren't exactly what we thought before. And most of our assumptions are also true. So I found that some doctors in China are now saying that they want to be paid for the people that are healthy. And normally, doctors get paid when people are sick. But they're saying that for the months that people are healthy, those people pay them. And when you get sick, you don't have to pay them because the doctors feel that they failed at their job. So it's interesting that doctors are getting paid when people are healthy, but not when they're sick.
In in most music, we think of the one as the downbeat, the beginning of the musical phrase. 1, 2, 3, 4. But in West African music, the one is thought of as the end of the phrase, like the period at the end of a sentence. So you can hear it not just in the phrasing, but the way they count off their music. 2, 3, 4, 1. And this math is also accurate.
It also goes for saying about music. Normally, we think of the one beat as the downbeat, or normally we think of one as the downbeat. Go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. But in West African music, the one is thought of at the end of the phrase, or the beat. So it would be 2, 3, 4, 1. 2, 3, 4, 1. So you kind of can hear it in the phrasing. It might not be exactly right there, but you can hear it. And here, the snap is also correct.
There's a saying that whatever true thing you can say about India, the opposite is also true. So let's never forget, whether at TED or anywhere else, that whatever brilliant ideas you have or hear, that the opposite may also be true. Domo arigatou gozaimashita.
There's a saying that whatever is true that you can say about India, the opposite is also true. So it doesn't matter if you're at home or if you're at TED, just remember that even your greatest, most brilliant ideas can also have the opposite meaning to them. So always keep that in mind.